My name is Ryan, and I'm a junior at Weston University in Austin, Texas. I've been living off campus for a couple of years now, sharing a small apartment with different roommates every semester. It's not much, but it's better than the noisy dorms I dealt with as a freshman. I guess you could say I'm a pretty laid-back guy, focused on my studies. Sure, but I also like to hit up local bars with friends and just chill. Nothing too wild. This semester, though, something felt off from the start. My new roommate, Alex, seemed nice enough at first, quiet, a bit shy, but harmless. We didn't talk much, and to be honest, that was fine by me. He kept to himself most of the time, staying in his room for hours, barely leaving except for classes. I just figured he was the introverted type. We all have our quirks, right? So I didn't really question it. It wasn't until about a month in that I noticed the strange things. I would catch Alex staring at me for a second too long before quickly looking away. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just socially awkward. But then I started feeling like I was being watched, even when I was alone in the apartment. One night, Alex left his laptop in the living room while he went out. I needed to finish an assignment, and my own computer was acting up. It didn't seem like a big deal to use his for a few minutes. He'd left it unlocked after all. But when I opened his desktop, a folder stood out to me, titled Ryan. I thought it was odd, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was something for school. Maybe I was overthinking it. Curiosity got the better of me, though, and I clicked on it. I froze. Inside were hundreds of photos of me, taken from all sorts of angles and places. Photos of me walking across campus, sitting in class, eating lunch at the dining hall. There were even pictures of me in our apartment, some from inside my own room. Chills ran down my spine. How long had he been doing this? How have I not noticed? I slammed the laptop shut and sat there, trying to wrap my head around what I had just seen. My skin crawled, knowing that I had been living with someone who was stalking me. And not just in public, this was happening right under my own roof. Alex came home a little later, acting like everything was normal. I couldn't even look at him. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to do. Should I confront him? Should I call the police? I was in shock. Eventually, I decided I had to say something. The tension was too much to bear. So, one evening, I worked up the courage and confronted him. I demanded to know what was going on, why he had been taking those photos. At first, he denied it, but when I told him I had seen the folder, his face went pale. He looked terrified, but not in the way I expected. He wasn't scared of me, he was scared of losing me. Alex broke down and admitted everything. He said he had become obsessed with me, that he admired me and wanted to be closer to me. He had been following me for months before we became roommates and had somehow manipulated things to ensure we ended up living together. Hearing him confess all of this made my stomach turn. I packed my bags that night and left. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I found a place to crash with some friends, and the next day, I moved out for good. I blocked Alex on everything and tried to erase him from my life, but it wasn't over. A week later, I was scrolling through my emails when I noticed something strange. I had received a message from Alex's account. It was sent the night before I saw the news. The subject line simply read, "You'll always be with me." I opened it, half expecting some long-winded confession, but all it contained was a single photo, one of me, asleep in my own bed, taken just before I moved out. The next morning, I saw a news report saying Alex had been found dead in our old apartment from an apparent overdose. The police ruled it a suicide, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. Maybe Alex had planned his death all along. Maybe someone else had gotten to him first. Either way, the fear never left me. Even now, I keep looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'll ever truly be free from his obsession. I didn't think much about joining the study group at first. Finals were around the corner at Redwood University in Boulder, and I figured it would be nice to prepare with some of my classmates. We met late at night in one of the older library buildings on campus. The place was practically deserted, with only a few dim lights flickering in the halls. It was eerie, but the group seemed friendly enough, so I ignored it. There were 4 of us in total. Sarah, always bubbly and chatty; Tim, the quiet guy who mostly kept to himself; and then there was Todd. Todd made me uneasy from the start. He wasn't loud or aggressive, just intense. He never smiled, and his eyes seemed to always linger too long on people. Whenever someone asked him a question, he would answer quickly and then go silent, like he didn't want to be bothered. The others didn't seem to notice anything strange, but I always felt something was off about him. One night, after a particularly long study session, everyone decided to pack up and head out. I was lagging behind, determined to finish some last-minute notes. Todd lingered longer than usual, staring at the exit as if he was waiting for everyone to leave. He made me feel uncomfortable, but I tried to brush it off. After everyone left, I stayed behind, figuring it would be better to finish up my work in the quiet of the empty building. That's when I heard it, Todd's voice echoing through the hall. He wasn't alone, though. He was on the phone, speaking in a low, almost whispered tone. At first, I couldn't make out what he was saying, but the more I listened, the more uneasy I became. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Everything's ready," he said. "They won't see it coming. The group's first. I've taken care of it all." My blood ran cold. The group's first. Was he talking about us? I couldn't stay hidden any longer. Quietly, I grabbed my things and slipped out of the building. I didn't stop running until I made it to my dorm, heart racing, my mind filled with horrible thoughts. I went straight to the police the next morning, feeling ridiculous at first, like I might be overreacting. But when they took my statement seriously, I knew something was very, very wrong. They launched an investigation immediately. Todd was arrested later that day. It turned out he had been planning a mass shooting on campus, with the study group as his first target. He had already gathered weapons, mapped out his route, and had a list of people he intended to hurt. I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something horrific. To think that I sat across from him, studying like everything was normal, when he was planning such a nightmare. Even now, I can't walk through campus without wondering how close I came to being part of his plan. It started small, things you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. Dr. Peterson, my history professor at Oak Ridge University in Syracuse, began acting strangely. At first, it was just little things. He'd arrive late to class, his clothes rumpled like he hadn't slept. His lectures, once clear and concise, became disjointed. He would drift off mid-sentence, mumbling under his breath about being washed. None of us took it seriously. Maybe he was just stressed. Then one day, he stopped showing up altogether. The university made an announcement saying Dr. Peterson had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons. I didn't buy it. He'd been teaching here for years, never missed a day, and suddenly he's just gone. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, so I started digging. I went to the library, looked up old faculty records, and that's when I stumbled across something chilling. Over the last decade, several other professors had also vanished. No real explanation was ever given, just vague excuses about sabbaticals or early retirements. It felt like a pattern. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I decided to break into Dr. Peterson's office. I knew it was a stupid idea, but my curiosity had gotten the better of me. The door was locked, but after some fiddling, I managed to get it open. The office was dark and musty, like no one had been there in weeks. I rummaged through his desk, finding nothing unusual at first. just papers and textbooks. But then, behind a stack of files, I found it, a small, worn journal. I flipped it open and quickly realized this wasn't just any notebook. Dr. Peterson had been writing down his suspicions. He believed that a secret society was operating within the university, controlling everything from the curriculum to the faculty. He wrote about shadowy figures, late-night meetings in the administration building, and how certain professors who got too close to the truth were silenced. The more I read, the more paranoid his writings became. He even mentioned that he felt like he was being followed. That was the last entry. I left the office shaken. The next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. I kept thinking about what I'd read, about how Dr. Peterson had disappeared after getting too close to something. It felt like I was living in a bad movie. Then, one afternoon, two men in suits approached me as I was walking back to my door. They were polite but cold, their faces expressionless. They didn't say much, just warned me to stop asking questions about Dr. Peterson and the other missing professors. One of them even smiled, but it wasn't comforting. It felt like a threat. That night, I packed up my things and left Oak Ridge University. I didn't tell anyone, didn't look back. I couldn't. The fear was too real. Even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me, waiting to see if I'll start dating again. I won't.